Okay, so the time now on the record is, I've got 12:06 on the clock, let's use the one on the wall. That looks close enough, 12:06 p.m., the scheduled meeting of the Public Safety Committee for August. And we'll start with Assembly members present, so
Dave Trainee, Acres Assembly.
Paul Holman on Assembly, Chair of the Public Safety Committee. And if you wouldn't mind, just go around the table, make sure everybody knows who's here. So, Ms. Wiedmeyer, if you would.
Oh, yes, Janet Bittmeyer, Deputy Director of the Department of Health and currently the Acting Director.
Craig Gales, Alaska Waste, Sales Manager.
Darrell Hess, Municipal Ombudsman. Mark Mew, Anchorage Police Department.
Thank you for being here, appreciate that. I have an agenda, and I apologize, my Assembly aide is en route. She apparently went to where we have been meeting more regularly. Just make a quick announcement that it appears that we're going to try to get a central, neutral, midtown location, and we think the Assembly, either the chambers or somewhere in the Assembly area at the Lusac Library. So second Wednesday still, same at noon to 1. Better, good parking, reasonable good access from all four directions at the Assembly. Does anybody have any objections to that location? Is that problematic for anybody?
Although we do have a conference room down there right next to Assembly Chambers.
Yeah.
And that's a good, we were out there before, we've had 25 people in that room before.
So we can get that secured I think Barbara said that she had a result back saying we can use those locations, and that's good. Oh, there's good. So if we can get the agendas real quick, if you don't mind. Thank you, Chris. And one other quick indulgence of, if we can do a personal privilege for Jessie Coltrane in Alaska Department of Fish and Game. She is working on an animal problem right now, and she said she would be here sometime after the noon hour, and then she said she thought she might be here towards the end of the meeting, and that may work in our favor. We can take care of the other part of the business. So, haven't seen Chief Bashu or anyone from Fire, so hopefully they'll be here shortly. So with that, Janet, I'm not sure if you sat in on any of the other previous public safety committees.
I have just sat in on one, and I think Chief Mew took it over.
Yeah.
He's like that.
Well, if you don't mind, we'll use Chief Mew as kind of a guinea pig to get started, and that way you can give an update. We just have a few questions from Health and Human Services. If you look on our agenda, we put in staffing and budget issues for 2013. I know that you're acting director, deputy director, and we're right in the middle of the administration building its proposed budget to give to the Assembly. Let's just, I guess it's pretty simple, maybe report me quick. Is there anything that's on your radar that the Assembly should know about? Any equipment, personnel, staffing, anything that you think, building concerns or anything that the Assembly should be aware of to help your position in the department serving our citizens in Health and Human Services?
Will never bring up building issues to me, because it's just, we constantly having building issues, as you know. I think the biggest concern I have right now is the SART program, and they've been running, and the Red Providence has acted to do its part as a community partner in picking up some of that. But we did present to the mayor that it is looking like we need more funding for that. So that would be a concern, because that is a considerable concern for our community.
So if you don't mind, then I'll jump. The SART program, Sexual Assault Response Team.
Yes.
And are those largely grant positions that either from the federal or states, or is it community budget positions? Chief, do you know?
It's been funded in a number of ways over the years. The state, I just heard from the governor's office last week. I haven't answered them yet, but they wanted to know if we were getting any grant funds or not, because the state may be able to supply some money. It looks like $150,000 would be the max this year, which is not sufficient, I don't think, for the program. But there is a chance we could get that amount. The state has more than that, but they want to fund SART in rural areas and villages and stuff. And so they got 150 that could go for municipalities, and there is a possibility that we could soak up all of that and could justify that.
Department of Health currently gives the program $350,000.
How much?
$350,000, and
Is that
that's
from
what
our-
we haven't changed that as far as this year.
So that's general government funds, I take it?
Yes.
For our budget.
And then they had a
101.
then they had a federal earmark that was around $109,000 a year that is discontinuing.
There was a
And-
while we funded it out of those old, the LLABG, when that program existed back in the 90s and early 2000s, but that's all dried up and gone away. So,
And I know you've been on the assembly for a while, so you're probably familiar with the program, but
Couple of years.
for me, it's concerning because this is a program that actually works. Forensically, it's needed for criminal prosecution. It's the best practice in investigative tools. Am I wrong?
oh no, I think it's the way that we'll always operate. And I think the hospital at Providence loses money on this deal already, but they insist on doing it. So, but you know, it's been a challenge. Back in Chief O'Leary's days, I remember him shaking his head saying, "We got to get SART in the operating budget sometime." You know, we've gone from one grant to special appropriations to, you know, different ways of funding it over the years. The problem is it is expensive.
And so far, what's the dollar amount budget? What's the need? Which is it, 350?
Oh, I believe it's pushing 300,000. And right now Providence doesn't charge for the pharmacy costs and some of the other, they tend to they treat us for STDs. They don't charge us for that. But we don't want it back in municipality. Our contracts are not conducive to having that kind of a 24-hour operation standby type thing, because we had it once here and it wasn't pretty under the union contract. So we were very interested in keeping it at Providence.
So just to be clear, because I thought I had a pretty good knowledge, but I just want to make sure. The monies that are used currently are used to pay salaries or staff at the SART Center for those nurses? Or is it
Well,
used?
it's all inclusive because you have to run a business, you have to,
I think they bill us per SART exam.
yes, it's,
And so I don't think that the per SART exam fee that we pay covers all of Providence's expenses.
yeah, they have infrastructure expenses. I think it's around $1,400 an exam.
You know what you might try is get hold of N1P, see if they've got any grant money that comes down. I was looking at what they're giving out, they're not giving anything close to what they've ever grant money.
So, let the record show Ms. Gray Jackson, we're being taped, they said something, of course, Ms. Gray Jackson's in attendance. We started with Health and Human Services, fire's not here at the moment, and the concern is for the coming year, the budget, SART, the Sexual Assault Response Team nurses, and right now you think there's a possible about $300,000 shortage that we need to try to figure out where we're going to get funded
But we may be able to take $150,000
from
worth
state.
of dollars worth of sting out of that figure, depending on what I hear from the state. But that would be for the next year, and of course, that's their fiscal year, so I don't know how it's gonna line up with our fiscal year. So, I mean, we may be able to mitigate that, but we won't fund all of it that way.
I have a question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so there's a shortage because for the 2013 budget,
Yes.
okay, that you've been asked to cut?
No, we're not, we're just saying HHS has provided $350,000 towards the program.
Right.
And we've recently had conversations with Jennifer Meyer, who's over there, who's their head nurse, and she figures they're about, it's like $265 or pushing $300,000 short, although they haven't indicated to us their willingness, what they're willing to contribute.
So it's a shortage that doesn't have anything to do with the 2013 budget? I'm just
Well,
trying to
well, I'm
clarify.
asking each department what their concerns are on their staffing and their budget issues, what we can do in this and we be aware of. And this was one that was identified. So essentially, there was grant funding in the past that is no longer available. And
From general government?
No, it's
The
been
federal.
funded federally, it's
Okay,
been
all
funded
right.
state.
All right, so the grant money isn't available?
That's right.
Okay, but I know sometimes we have to do matches, okay? And so I thought that maybe you were saying that our match that we usually do is not available. Okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, we're just trying to figure out a way we just need to be aware of it on the assembly because I know that it's a great program and of course it's needed for investigations and such. Anything else, Ms. Meyer? I know, again, you're stepping in rather, thankfully you had a bit of a overlap with Ms. Engel, and I guess she's still trying to work on transitioning out, so you still have the knowledge base, I guess.
Yeah, I don't have anything else. I mean, we've done some things. I don't know if this matters to you, we're taking away our 980s hours, our office building hours are not changing really for the clients, and yet they're changing for the employees because we frankly are just facing leaner times and we need to run more efficiently. So that's a big change for our employees.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So not just your department, but most departments, probably every department is looking at eliminating 980s because of Kronos, correct?
Oh, no, we were asked if there was a business need for it, and really, we believe it's good for employee morale. We believe we have a hard time recruiting in the Muni as far as competing places in the marketplace, for instance, our nurses. So we think that 980s is a nice benefit to offer that we don't think our competitors offer.
It's a great
But
benefit.
as far as keeping longer business, counter hours or anything like that, we just don't have the staff to do that, and 980s doesn't necessarily help that.
So are you saying that your 980 situation has nothing to do with Kronos? Because I've been hearing all over the municipality that the reason why folks are being asked not to eliminate 980s is because it doesn't interface with Kronos.
I
No,
think
Kronos
it-
does 980s. It's doing it right now.
Really?
Yeah, it doesn't.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
I've proven myself.
Yes.
That's good to know.
Successfully did it just Monday.
Appreciate hearing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, OEM is not here. And I'm sorry,
Donna Mears with SWS.
okay, very good. And I noticed, and I made a commitment, Ms. Coltrane is here from last Department of Fish and Game, and so I pretty much made everyone else aware, I'm sorry, on the agenda-wise, and I know that's why you guys are probably here as well, because we'd asked about concerns of bears in particular, but I guess wildlife in Anchorage. And I'll share with you briefly what I got from one constituent, but I've been hearing from several over the most recent shooting of a black bear sow over in East Anchorage that had 3 cubs. And this is just one of the flip side, what I've been hearing more of, which is, can we do something, and what are we doing about the problem with people attracting bears into the neighborhoods and doing what I think bears would do, look for food or trash. But this is one person, Mr. Holman, I want less moose and bears in Anchorage. Several people, including children, have already been injured this year by moose. I think the children of Anchorage deserve better. I think all of us, they and all of us, have the right to play in our community without fear of being injured by a wild animal. I've lived in Anchorage all my life. I enjoy the animals, but not in my city, not anymore. I take my children outside every day. Last fall, I learned there was an 800-pound grizzly eating raspberries along the bike path that separates our subdivision from subdivision to the east. I stopped walking along the bike path. That was tough because my 2-year-old daughter really likes the raspberries. Yes, so do the bears. This spring, my husband and I hid behind some small trees while a mama moose decided our fate and the fate of our 2 small children, crying in our arms. Luckily, she only bluffed charged us and left after a 2-minute standoff. I don't go on that bike trail just to the north of our subdivision anymore. 3 weeks ago, we learned about a black bear with 3 cubs coming in the neighbors' yards and getting into trash cans in the middle of the day. I point out the times of day because I think it shows a certain shyness missing in this black bear. It also is the time of day I'm out walking with my children. I didn't walk around the part of the subdivision, that part, for the next 3 days. I'm upset with Fish and Game for not doing anything about the bear when I called and was relieved when APD bear shot the bear. I thought, okay, it's safe. Yesterday my husband told me he walked with a neighbor whose adult daughter was attacked by a moose. It happened in her yard here in our subdivision. Luckily, she's alive. She has 5 broken ribs and a punctured lung. I don't think my children would survive an aggressive attack by an animal. They are too young and it would all happen too fast. I grew up here and it wasn't like this. There were fewer moose and bears in Anchorage. We played outside in the woods all day without fear of animals. Now I talk with girlfriends that won't go to Kincaid anymore, too many moose encounters. My mom and her girlfriends don't want to walk the service trails anymore, too many bears eating moose. I want my city back, something needs to change. So I know this isn't the first time we've talked about black bears, brown or grizzly bears, moose in our big wildlife of the city. I know that there have been all sorts of different ideas floated, and I think there was actually some assembly action a couple of years past, I can't recall specifically, but it was before I was on the body, about the bear problem. So I guess my question, and since you're in attendance, I don't want to put you on the spot, but is, do you know what status we are, or where we're at with, like, I guess, tracking, counting, and activity of bear, moose, problem animals? And I know, Chief, maybe, again, I'll ask you to dovetail it to what the department's doing about, I guess, on the other end of it, enforcement, which might have to do with Health and Human Services on the trash, but I think that might have gone to zoning and Jack Frost and their people with the trash. And then SWS and, of course, Waste Management, what may be being done about the trash and the collectors and receptacles and stuff. So, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just follow up, if you remember, Mr. Training Light at yesterday's meeting, Ms. Osander said that in the Title 21 rewrite, that the fares are being addressed. I just want to mention that. You remember her
Right,
saying
yeah,
that?
that's right.
And I don't know what she means, but
As far as I understand, most of the wildlife aspects of Title 21 have been eliminated. We had put in back in, with the initial onset of Title 21 redo back in 2002 or 2003, recommendations for different types of zoning and mitigation to avoid conflicts along certain areas throughout the municipality, and that got whittled down to a sentence, and then last I checked, there was nothing that mentions wildlife whatsoever
Really?
in bear or moose. There's some things about fisheries and
Chickens. We dealt with
there's
chickens.
chickens, but they are not wildlife in Title 21. So as far as I understand, most of the Title 21, the mention of wildlife and mitigation for wildlife has been removed from it completely. But to answer your question concerning bear and moose population, our moose numbers are actually down, and that's a big misconception, and we hear this all the time. There are more moose in town, but our population is actually at a relatively all-time low, based on our surveys last year. Considering the winter that we had this year, I am assuming that our population is even lower. We won't know that until the fall. So we're at about 1,500 moose, just slightly over 1,500 moose, based on our last survey last year in the fall. Our population objective, we're under intensive management for moose in 14C, which is the municipality of Anchorage. And our population objective under intensive management law is 1,500 to 1,800 moose. So we, right now, are at the bottom end of our population objective. We maintain high levels of harvest throughout the municipality. The areas that we have been unable to tackle with a harvest regime have been municipal parks. Now, 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now, working with John Rada and City Parks, we were able to open up a limited archery hunt in Mirror Lake and Edmonds Park. We were trying to target Beach Lake Park for a limited archery hunt, but it was met with public resistance. Users of the park were not interested in championing that. So we decided to start slower to prove that we could pull off a safe archery hunt. And I think that, as we go through with this hunt, this fall will be the first time that hunt will go on. And so, proving to the parks that we can do this safely, people aren't going to be shot by arrows. Hopefully not many moose will run around with arrows sticking out of them, which is always the big concern with an archery hunt, and it happens on base all the time, and I get to see it and deal with it. But I think, as we go forward, discussions towards opening some of these larger municipal parks for limited and very controlled moose hunting is a possibility. But as in the past, we've had to prove that we could do this safely to the community, because while you get an email, as you get an email from a constituent, we get it both sides. I mean, and you guys probably hear they're from certain specific types of minorities, and whether they're a minority or majority, we've done several very well responded to public opinion surveys on management of moose and bear, particularly in the municipality. And the general consensus has been and continues to be that people really appreciate the wildlife we have. It sets us apart. And that they like to maintain the populations that we have and deal with individual animals on an individual basis. And so that's kind of the management tactic that we look at. We're constantly trying to look at ways to increase hunting opportunity where the opportunity exists. But one thing that's been made very clear through these surveys is that people do not want the department to go out and cull animals to reduce population numbers. That's not an acceptable management technique. Harvest is an acceptable management practice, and then dealing with individual animals, in which we do. When we have reports of individual animals that are posing an increased public safety concern, then either we deal with them, or APD deals with them, or troopers, or all three of us work together to deal with them. So moose hunting, one of the things where areas where we can look to in the future, I think, is Kincaid Park. I think that, this spring was quite a volatile spring for moose stompings, and 98% of it revolved around the new single track trails in Kincaid Park and mountain bikers. And so there's a lot of education that needs to go on there as well, and how to make ourselves a little bit safer and choose our activities wiser during parts of the year in order to maintain, and stay safe, because we're not going to go out there and kill every single moose in Kincaid Park. But so those are some of the things that we've been looking to for the future, and I think there's ways to do that. It all has to go through a board game regulatory process. Currently, the parks regulation says that there is no hunting or trapping within municipal parks unless allowed by the superintendent. And so I've worked real close with John Rada to try to slowly ease this into a public perception, because while there are people that say, get rid of moose, I tell you what, if I say we're going to start a moose hunt in Kincaid Park, there are going to be plenty of people that come out against it. And the same with, Beach Lake Park, we thought, no brainer. We get complaints from mushers. The mushing community was against it. So you just never know what you're going to get. So these things we kind of try to move forward with slowly to prove that we can do it. The Upper Hillside Chugach State Park moose hunt has been very successful. We've had issues with it, but that was one that there was huge public outcry against it, and we proved that we could do it. That is what moved us into allowing this small hunt in Mirror Lake and Edmonds. I think we can prove we can do it there. We can move on to bigger and better things. But if we mess it up, it's all going to go away, just like the 83 archery hunt on the hillside. That killed moose hunting in the municipality for 20 years.
Mr. Trini had a question.
Is there anything the Assembly can do to help you, give you the tools you need to authorize it?
I think it's just working with the Parks Department, and ultimately, I don't think anybody's going to want to lose an election over pushing something that's publicly unpalatable. So through education and showing that we can do these things, and I have a really good working relationship with John Rada and the Parks folks. They've been really helpful, and just continuing to foster that and continuing to have those discussions for moose, especially.
But a hunt on the hillside for bears, because I've lived here 40 years. In the last 10 years, we've seen an increase in bear-human incidents that we never saw 20 years ago.
Right, and one thing we do know is we have a lot more people on the hillside.
A lot more bears
trash.
too coming down to visit us.
Yeah, well, and, I don't think that there's necessarily any more bears, but I do know that the problems that we see, probably 95% of our problems revolve around trash and black bears. And so yes, there is things that the municipality can do to help alleviate those problems. Bears don't hang around our houses because they like the neighborhood, they like the trash they get or the things that are left out negligently. That being said, there's excellent bear habitat in most areas of the hillside. Coming down into Midtown, different things like that. Well, now we have the fish run, and that's a whole new fun thing for me to deal with. But they come in and they stay because of trash. And so we've worked with Alaska Waste over the years to allow for the providing of the bear-resistant timber carts, and that's really helped out certain neighborhoods. Stuckagin Heights is a model neighborhood for us. It's smack between Bicentennial Park and Chugach State Park. They're right in the middle of North Fork and Campbell Creek and South Fork and Campbell Creek. They have brown bears and black bears. They are the hot spot for bear activity. We used to have problems there all the time. We worked with Alaska Waste to provide timber carts for those neighborhoods. I don't get calls from Stuckagin Heights anymore. We just don't have a trash problem. You drive through there on trash day, and probably 85% of the people have bear-resistant timber carts. And so, if with that, so we can do things to help alleviate the problems that are causing. And sometimes I think we have this misconception that, one bear, if a bear is here, and then there's a bear there, and there's a bear there, and there's a bear there, then that's 5 bears. That's not necessarily true. We know a lot about bear movements and how they can be in one neighborhood one day and another neighborhood the other, but we get publicity and all of a sudden it's 2 bears. And so it is kind of a hard thing to get at, but we do know what the problems are. I don't know how many bears there are for sure, because we've never conducted a scientific survey of numbers. We're using density estimates done from other areas and looking at harvest records.
Is there a plan to survey or to check and see how many? Because I know that they used to track some.
Wajid Falus. It was millions we've never tracked. We've never done a population survey for 14 zebra bears. And the reasoning being, and we're talking millions and millions of dollars, because you're looking at genetic market capture studies. And it's just never been something that's been of interest. We have incredible amount of harvest of black bears in particular in 14C. Lots of harvest opportunity, just like with moose, pretty much everywhere except Anchorage Bowl, Eagle River proper, and Joint Base Elmendorf Richardson can you harvest black bears, and people do it at high rates. To the point where we had a conservation concern a couple of years ago where we're starting to see really high percentage of females in population in the harvest. But we do know when you hit bears really hard, especially black bears, they come back in force the next year, you know. So you see density dependent reproduction in black bears. We started seeing litters of 5 after that heavy harvest year. So you open up space, they will fill it back in. Increasing opportunity for bear harvest is a little more problematic than moose. Moose, we can look at archery and shotgun. Bears, to get that close, you're talking about baiting. And 14C is not open to baiting because of the obvious problems that it causes with food conditioning of bears in residential areas. That being said, the majority of 14C is open for a year-round harvest of black bears, no closed season, bag limit of 1. And then we have other areas of Chugach State Park. The majority of Chugach State Park is open for the majority of the year, day after Labor Day until June 15th. When bear hunting, not many people want to harvest a black bear in the middle of summer anyways. So we maintain lots of harvest for black bear. We take a lot of black bear. And then what we do is we deal with individual bears on an individual basis that are causing a problem. And we don't fear to remove them.
Age-old question, that was I remember as a younger teen, probably even early 70s, I guess, here. I remember, and maybe it's just, I saw it once and then it happens all the time, but I thought at one point there was a bear relocation issue where you take bears and put them out in more wilderness and move them away. But
there is no more wilderness. It's close to Anchorage. The folks in the valley do not appreciate me bringing black bears there,
Sure.
and the folks on Kenai do not appreciate me bringing them there either. So occasionally in the past, we would have a black bear, a yearling black bear that would get in trouble once, and we'd haul it down to the Kenai, and those guys do not appreciate that. So our policy now is, if a bear shows up in downtown or midtown or someplace where there's not really good bear habitat and it hasn't really gotten in trouble but it's in a bad spot, we will dart it and move it out to Chugach State Park somewhere out of the outskirts of town. And for the most part, they haven't returned back to midtown. They may return someplace else. But bears typically come back. If a bear is causing a problem, like we have, a bear in Midtown right now that's been there pretty much all summer, up and down Chester Creek, Russian Jack Park area, and we've been
brown
out.
or black?
Black bear. The brown bears move through there too because of the fish now, but they usually do it at night. Nobody sees them unless they get hit on the road.
I remember that
Yeah,
one.
no more. So, and things like that. If we've been out many times this summer, after we get calls on that bear, but we never can catch up with it because there's so many wooded areas it disappears into. And that's a bear where we probably wouldn't relocate because it's in Midtown, it's getting into trash, I know it is, and where am I going to put it? So we just shoot it. There are other areas that are on the outskirts, things like Muldoon and say the Baxter Bog neighborhood and stuff, where they're on the periphery of their habitat. Bears are coming in, getting trash, going back out, coming in, getting trash, going back out. And in those cases, we would go in there and shoot every bear that came into Muldoon, and 2 will replace it tomorrow. Guarantee it. I've done it before, So it's not necessarily a good solution, but there's only one reason why they're coming in to an area like Muldoon. It's the trash. So we're trying to address those issues.
So that begs the question, and perhaps shifting just a little bit to see in both hands. Anecdotally, I heard that it was a problem address or 2 that had lots of trash bags in their backyard. That the bear was
Where?
climbing over. Excuse me.
Where?
The Baxter one, the one with the sound. No. Did not identify, because I had another neighbor, and this is just
There's
one.
probably that, but the whole, if you drive, Baxter Bog is a big area,
Sure.
and I think that's the thing. People think I live in the Baxter Bog neighborhood, they think of the street around them.
Yeah.
But it's a huge neighborhood and everything's different. So yes, there probably was some of that, because that goes on in every neighborhood. But a lot of it is just, you know, not that it was a trashy area or anything, but people having their trash in their garbage can sitting next to their garage. It's not like they've got piles of trash piled up everywhere, but that's a bear attractant. I mean, it's easy access for a bear, and you add 400 houses like that, that's a lot of food.
So, all right, so perhaps I owe this gentleman a better return call than, or maybe I should refer him. This gentleman is like apparently a big game hunter out of Texas most of the time. He called, last name McDonald, I think, if anybody's heard the name. Anyway, he speaks with a Texan accent, and so I was okay, I didn't need an interpreter. But bottom line was he was able to tell me that he could see a neighbor or two that had like 10 or 20 bags of trash in their backyard, and that the bear would run over climb over the fence and get in. And so he was angry and upset with them, and what are we doing about, and I guess that leads me to that question, what are we doing about either bear-proof, and I heard you say that bear-proof tipper carts, and what are we doing about that as entities, and then what are we doing, APD, Fish and Game, code enforcement, who's writing tickets if there are those locations?
Well, those type of things, if the state statute says that if you leave trash out in a bear, that trash out, or food, or pets food, or livestock feed out negligently in a way that attracts a bear, you can be fined $310 citation. It's not a proactive citation. We have to have proof that a bear actually got in it. We can't go on neighbor's word, because there's all kinds of neighborhood feuds out there. But if somebody's stockpiling trash like that, that's against a municipal code. Code enforcement will deal with that, and they're really responsive. Rich Byrne has been great to work with, and I usually just call him and say, hey Rich, look, I got a problem, and he sends somebody over that day. But it takes multiple warnings and stuff and gradations before they ever actually write a citation. But what we really want is just people to clean it up. Dave and I we actually just came from Centennial Campground, where we issued a citation to a camper that had a cooler out that bears got into. And so we write the safe statute regulation citation. AST, wildlife troopers, do that as well. APD also has that enforcement ability as well. And then code enforcement will deal with the proactive, but they are really dealing with large stockpiles of trash. They're not dealing with, there's somebody's can. Right, the trash can. They're dealing with the old trailer full of trash, or the pickup truck full of trash, or the giant pit in the back of the yard full of trash. But they're not dealing, so they're a little proactive.
And SWS has a code enforcement person that does that within our service area as well. So, and they work cooperatively, and mostly it's trying to talk people into doing the right thing. And part of the issue I understand is that the code that we have to rely on for that enforcement is weak and could use a lot of help. I understand that they mostly rely on a provision in the code in Title 26 that says that trash must be set out the day of service and removed from the curb by the end of the day, and it's a $75 fine.
And nobody pays any attention.
Well, and then we're also complaint driven. There's not, the SOP is you go out on complaints. You're not proactively dealing with neighborhoods. Last night I was in just on that street. What is it, Rosella? Mm-hmm. At 10 o'clock last night, and about a third of the neighborhood had their trash carts out on the curb, and that was 2 weeks ago.
The bears were shot. And I can guarantee you, I spend a ridiculous amount of time driving around town looking at people's trash. And even the very best of neighborhoods, 30% of the people are not compliant. Very easily the best. And the worst, 30% are, and 70% aren't.
I think the other thing you need to look at is even some people that want to comply, they necessarily don't have the garage or the area to put their trash can, and so it does end up beside the house, like Jesse saw probably hundreds of times. And they're trying to do the best, but that's kind of where they're at. And so their trash can is kind of out, even if they don't put it out the night before.
It's out all the
It's
time.
still out. And that's some of the issues that we've been up against in years past. We've been working with Fish and Game for
11 years.
11, I was going to say 6 or 10, but 11 years on this issue. And we work hand in hand. Of course, we do a lot of the hillside. We probably
And Muldoon?
98% of the hillside. We do a lot of Muldoon, and then there's kind of that gray area where solid waste services comes into play. So we've looked at a lot of different cans and issues, and this is actually currently, I don't have enough of these, but this is currently what we do for, but this is our, it's called the Bear Saver, made by Bear Saver. It's our trash can. Jesse knows exactly what the can looks like. Great. Familiar with it?
I have one of those cans.
Do you?
Yeah, so I won't need your,
Yeah, Mark.
works good. It's chewed up, but it's never been opened.
But anyway, this is what we offer, and it's kind of how we offer the service. And the people that have Stuckagon Heights half a dozen years ago, it was nonstop. You know, they'd be calling us up, or 10 years ago. And we did some different designs, and this one we finally came up with where we've got basically probably 98% of the people on these trash cans here. It's a 96-gallon bear tipper, bear-resistant trash can. There is no bear-proof trash can. You give a couple of grizzlies enough time, they'll get into anything.
Sure.
But it is a bear-resistant, and we tested it a couple different times at the zoo, and it seemed to do pretty well, so we put it in place, like she said, about 10, 11 years ago. So we do have them available. We try and, one of the ways we try and keep them out in the field so that people don't want to maybe bring them back in at the end of the season, because bears are 6 months, 5, 6 months.
Roughly, yeah.
And then you're right back to winter. Bears are sleeping. We have no issues. So what we try and do is offer them a little bit of a break on the rent so that they just keep it. We continue to service it, and then in the summer it goes up a little bit. But what that does is it helps to keep the containers in their hands so that when we start up again in spring, they still got them. They haven't forgot about it. Just order a regular can and go, well, maybe I can get by this year, because maybe you can, maybe you can't.
I use mine year-round because frankly, there's neighborhood dogs, and, you know, it fixes that problem too.
So I had a couple follow-up questions, but Ms. Gray, you actually had a comment or question?
That's okay, thank you.
Okay, so one of the constituents, and it may have been, I'm sorry, I need to do a better job of tracking, because actually this drew up quite a bit of interest, as you know. One of the neighbors or one of the constituents had called and said that they asked, can't we get these locking cans, quote-unquote locking cans, and I'm guessing this is what they're talking about. The response, and whether they call solid waste or Alaska Waste, was that, well, we'd have to put a second person on the truck, and therefore it'd be more expensive.
Mark Mountain had an interview with Channel 2 weeks ago, and that was the quote that was chosen from that interview that went along with that story, and that was just after the sow was shot and the day before the Cubs.
I thought there was a mechanical device or something that we're emptying those cans.
Well,
There is, but you gotta manually unlatch them.
What you have is you have two different services. We have what's called on Hillside, we run smaller, we call them our mountain trucks, and they're four-wheel drive, and it, you know, because in the winter sometimes you're chained up and you're trying to get to people and whatnot. So it's a rear load service where the guy has to get out of the truck and he has to manually open it up, whether it's, well, yeah, manually open it up, then dump it, and then when the lid comes shut, it locks again. Then we have what's called our automated side loader, which I think you guys are probably 100% almost side loader.
Mid-November will be 100%.
Yeah, so what that is, that's when the truck comes by and an arm comes out, grabs a can and
But it
puts it
would-
in the truck.
Would it automatically do this?
No, what happens is on an automatic side loader is you're a right-hand steer, so your guy's driving off the right, and what he has to do is he has to, which ours are all stand-up, so you're standing up driving as you're doing the route. What he has to do is when he comes up to a bear proof, he has to jump out, he has to unlatch it, throw it open, then he gets back in, grabs the can, and you can actually even operate ours from the outside, so he wouldn't even have to get back in the cab. And he would dump that one, and then, either him or the customer would end up shutting the container and it would lock. What they do for us is the person that doesn't really have the garage that they can get this thing in, it's sitting beside the house, it's still latched. So it gives the bear an opportunity to probably smell it, he likes what he smells, but he's messing with it 9 times out of 10. Eventually he can't get it, especially a blackberry, he can't get it, so he just goes on to the next one or leaves it alone and goes on his merry way.
Ms. Green, Jackson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You're from solid waste, right?
Yes,
And the law says that you can't put garbage out until the morning of it being picked up, right?
yes.
How do you work with development, okay? Because, like where I live, okay, and we have covenants, and the covenant says, oh yeah, you can put it out the night before, and we're virtually breaking the law.
It's superseded by municipal code.
The covenants are?
No, municipal code supersedes covenants.
Right, that's what I thought. So then my question is, and I'm just trying to think of ways to, I don't know, maybe, and it's gonna take some work, is to go to board meetings, okay, of these developments and remind people that, hey, this is the law, and your 163 folks are breaking the law. You know, I mean, I think that would be a good start, because it really needs to be changed. Because I can tell you, my subdivision, I'm sure that they think that it's okay, you know, that it's not against the law to put it out the night before, and everybody does it. And we have bears hanging out there. So I'm just throwing that out, food for thought, and I'm happy to work with you to do something.
I don't know how much more we can saturate people with outreach. I don't know if you agree with that, but there's a lot of outreach that's done on that. Enforcement is a different issue, and that's not outreach. That gets into a different level of things. The first thing we need to do there is we need to have a better code to rely on. Title 26 is Solid Waste Services Collection Code. There's not something in the general municipal code. So it's a little bit, so our land use officers, our enforcement officers are using the code that was specifically developed for a solid waste services collection area. So there's not a good bear ordinance. There's stuff on rats. That is much more thorough.
I'd like to follow up.
92 or 93 in Anchorage, can't even sell them anymore.
Yeah.
I'd love to
so-
follow up with you on that, on the sideline, but Mr. Trainee, you have a comment?
Just Elvin and I represent the same area, and they're there, the garbage things are out tonight before they come to pick it up. Does your operation have anybody out there picking stuff up before 8 a.m.? Because I know I've heard the trucks going through the neighborhoods about 7-something.
What we try and do in the bear areas is we try and make sure that we're not there before 8 a.m. It's not a perfect scenario with, having as many customers as we have, but we try to make sure that we're not there.
Because what we do is we tell our neighbors you can't be out there until 6. I just want to make sure that they're not running there early, because this sheet we've got says you don't pick up till 8.
Those areas.
Yeah,
Yeah, and this is last the way.
the thing about that we've learned with Fish and Game with these bear carts is that, it's not a perfect world out there. We got to kind of keep educating everybody the best we can, and you have in different situations. We usually really don't even hear from customers unless they're having issues with bears, and they'll call up and say, hey, look, I just had a bear for the 3rd time ripping my garbage. I'm tired of it. What do you have? I really don't have any place to put my container, as far as in a garage or in a cubby hole, or, I'm not willing to build a storage shed or whatever the case may be. And even if they didn't put it out the night before, what this gives them is it gives them a method to lock their garbage up, whether it's beside their house or behind their house. And even if they put it out the night before, the bear can possibly come in. And because we're all humans, and it's not a perfect world, so even if you told people you can't do it, a lot of them will probably abide by it. But we all know that a lot of them are going to say, you know what, I really don't have time. I got to get out of here at 5 o'clock in the morning. I got to be working 6 o'clock or whatever. If this thing's sitting out on the curb, what it does, it gives us that assurance that it is locked if they use it properly, and basically they just got to shut the lid. And the bear is probably going to come up to it, but we're going to have a better chance of that bear leaving without getting in the garbage than we are with a regular container.
But I think you said 2 very important things there. One is it's an alternative storage method for during the week, an alternative to a garage or a log shed. So it is, one thing that can do that, but there are other methods for securing trash during the week. And the other thing is if the lid is locked. Even your customers that ask for the can don't always use it properly, correct?
Oh.
They either set stuff out next to it or don't
Overfill
latch
it
the
and can't latch
lid.
it.
Or they fill it and then they put another bag next to it, or, so the advocacy of them depends on proper use, and,
With the 96, and that's why we went to the 96, it's a big can. And I would say 9 times out of 10, most of the trash is in the can. For your average household.
Yeah, there are neighborhoods that are worse than others.
stuck again?
Stuck again is good, but there occasionally, but you know, I like I said, I drive around with a lot of trash, and I look at how people are using the Bear timber carts, and you know, and sometimes you see them where they're not lashed, but you know, Muldoon is probably the worst offender in that. You know, we really tried to get Muldoon onto these Bear timber carts, and people weren't using them right. They were, you know, they just had so much trash. They were piling them up outside. They weren't latching them. Most people didn't even get one. Low participation rate, and even less. So, I mean, but yes, but it is. I mean, yes, people have to use them right. It's just like bear-proof dumpsters. You got to close the lid. It's not bear-proof. It's open. But I think the majority of people, like Craig said, are using them correctly and want to use them correctly if they've got them. And then Craig, Alaska Waste also provides bear-proof dumpsters. Dumpster lids, and those have been great. And people, you know, that's really cleaned up some of these other areas. And I don't think Solid Waste Services provides any bear-proof dumpster lids either.
We've got lockable.
Lockable, but not bear-proof. Yeah, because I know UAA was having a problem, but they have or APU was having a problem. They have a contract with you guys, and they couldn't get bear-proof dumpsters, and so they were like, "What do we do?" And I said, "I don't know what to do." But that is an issue. Most of the areas that Solid Waste Services deal with aren't high bear areas. The one weird area is Baxter Bog, and
Is that
then-
SWS or is that?
Yeah, and then Government Hill. Every year, you know, bears go through Government Hill because they go along the coastal refuge and around. And so those are two areas that are serviced that we do typically have problems. We're starting to see more problems in Midtown. When we opened up Fish Passage along Chester Creek, what we started seeing is a couple of years ago, the fish count tripled, and bears that would pass through are now staying resident. And so now we're having more areas that are affected by Solid Waste Services, affected by bear activity along Chester Creek. And so that's something we've been having to deal with.
So let me just summarize real quick, and then I know Ms. Gray Jackson has to leave here shortly, so I'd like to get in a real quick discussion with the chief on another issue. But as I understand it, from the Fish and Game side, there's no there's no movement of wildlife typically. You don't typically move animals from.
Not typically. Occasionally, you know, in certain
Yeah.
situations, yes.
You'll destroy a bear that's really a problematic bear.
Right.
Moose, the same thing, I hope?
Yes.
Okay. But typically speaking, the issues as you see it are more education and awareness about the wildlife that's in our area, plus keeping our trash secure and picked up and clean.
For
Good
bears,
summary?
for sure, absolutely.
Good
yeah.
summary?
Uh-huh.
What about moose? Anything?
Moose, you know, I think some of the things with moose are, trash too is a problem with moose. Feeding is a problem with moose. There are inherent risks with moose calving in the spring. That's probably the most dangerous time. And that we try to educate people. We worry especially about kids because they're running around with their heads down and they, you know, occasionally get kicked. But then also working with the parks for responsible trail development. That's been a big issue.
Development, okay. And then also understand perhaps moose or bear controlled hunts, archery hunts, something in 14C.
Moose, definitely. Bear, because of, you know, you're talking high-powered rifles in city parks and wounding, issues with wounded bears.
Control gauge.
Yeah, if you have a bait
That's what
stand.
the police
you're really
put one
close.
down with every time they kill one.
Yeah.
With the 12 gauge.
But it's really easy when it's sitting in somebody's trash can.
They've already been
It's
made.
different when it's a hunt, you know. So, you know, that would take a little more work and in certain areas because of the safety risk.
We're looking for some ideas. I mean, honestly, I don't know if we're going to settle it today. I mean, this is not an issue that's just come
One
up
of the-
today.
one of
We
the
can send
other
Parker out
things-
with his taser.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
And his grill.
He did
Yeah.
taser one, if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
didn't he?
yes, he did.
So-
And we
But
still gotta
the
do
other thing I
something
just
with
wanted
it.
to mention, because we did come from Centennial Campground right now, and Centennial Campground has kind of been the problem child of the municipal parks for years. Most of the parks are getting over the years have gone to Bear Proof Containers. John Rada has worked really well with us, and as they've gotten money to buy Bear Proof Containers. And it's a bad example for municipal parks to set when they got their bottles that are in trash. And I think they're out of containers now. Holly said she was hoping to get some approval to order some more because we have additional issues with some areas like Baxter Bog. One of the big complaints was there's garbage cans, municipal garbage cans, all in Baxter Bog. The bears were just trashing and dragging. And we ran into one of the parks guys one day, and he was cleaning up all the mess the bears dragged around. And I said, I'll talk to Holly about this. And he's like, oh, please do, because it's a daily occurrence. We just got them.
So you're saying Centennial needs the bear-proof containers?
Centennial needs food storage containers because Centennial has a resident homeless population through the summer. I mean, that's really what it is. There's a lot of RV camping there. RV camping is great. Most of those people contain their food really well. A lot of people that are in Centennial Campground are tent campers, and they're living there all summer. And some of them don't have vehicles, they don't have jobs, they can't afford the $310 citation we just gave them, and they're keeping all their food in their tent. And it's dangerous, and I think that it's time that there was food containers provided. Chugach State Park is providing food caches at all their tent camping campsites now, and it's very helpful. And
Well, we'll look to see what the costs are. Perhaps that might be something we do with the state as well on some funding for that too.
Yeah,
So.
and and I talked to Tommy, who runs the park out there, and their big concern is who's going to clean them out. They need additional help if that's the way they're going to go. They see it as a solution, but people will be, it's an additional maintenance issue.
Well, I think they have to check each campsite when people check out anyway. so-
Absolutely, but they might have to clean up
One of
nasty
the things they do.
food.
Jesse, with the issues of the bear and moose, and the hunting seasons I think are great, but you have, and I think we've all been, well, most of us have probably been charged by a moose on the trail or whatever. And I do a lot of mountain biking around here, and it's great. There's certain trails where I really kind of stay away because there's just heavy moose populations in the area. But on and off, if you're not in the hunting season or whatever, and you're not hunting these moose, and you do have a problem moose or a bear, would Fish and Game then look at possibly darting that animal and maybe moving it to a place where we need the resource? Would that be a possibility?
You're talking moving adult moose.
Maybe adult moose and maybe it's calf, because usually that's where it comes to play.
Calves, right, well.
Is when-
The calves, when they're little, the adults are defending them.
Right.
So is that what you're talking about? Or
Yeah.
are you just talking about aggressive adult moose? We have a repeated.
Well, I guess I'm kind of talking about both depending on the situation and what's going on.
Well, there's a lot of different things when you talk about moving moose and moving them to where. Moving moose is very dangerous. It's dangerous for the animal because of the narcotics that we use to immobilize moose. It's not as easy as just like, I'm going to dart this small animal I can pick up, and it's an ungulate. I mean, it's got to stay recumbent. There's all kinds of issues. There's issues with disease transmission. We're seeing diseases in the moose population in Anchorage that we don't see on the other side of Alaska Range. So transmitting and moving moose and transplanting them to another area, there's some disease concerns as well, especially adult, the logistics of moving an adult moose. But that's a policy thing this is way above my head for moving moose out of Anchorage. And like I said, right now we're at, I've got hunters yelling, you're getting people saying, I want moose out of here. I got hunters yelling at me saying, where are all the moose? Because Ship Creek I nailed I opened up and we have because our intent was to decrease those numbers of moose in Ship Creek before they come down into Jay Bear and Muldoon and to the Anchorage Bowl area where we can access them. And now I got hunters yelling at me saying, we used to get moose here and now I can't get a moose here. And so it's a balancing act. I mean, there's definitely, both sides of the story here.
It is a huge balancing act. I guess what I'm trying to get at is that you're going to always have these problem moose and bears. They're going to appear, and it's just another maybe way to look at it to say, we know we have this issue. Instead of maybe putting it down and not taking them to the other side of Alaska, and maybe taking them to the other side of the Cook Inlet or whatever. Just maybe another method to look at it to say, maybe there's something else we have here that when it isn't hunting season and we do have an issue, instead of putting them down, we actually go out and try and
Well, and when we do put them down, they do go to charity. They are consumed by humans, you know, so it is providing food for people that are in need of food. So animals aren't going to waste.
It's actually, I guess, some comfort to those that, I suppose, look at it as a food source. Okay, so we've given some good due on that. I just want to summarize real quick. I've heard you say more than once that, at least a couple of times, that we need to look at code, either change or enhancement. I'd love to work with you on that. Perhaps myself and my colleagues here can work with you on that. And then the other thing is that I heard that the bear-proof carts aren't necessarily needing a second person. So maybe perhaps Mr. Madden's quote was just something on a generality basis rather than these locking lid ones. Maybe he was talking about if it were a different type of cart, I don't know.
SWS is looking at some cost estimations for what it would really take for labor and for materials to put a more realistic picture on that. But it will increase labor because by mid-November we'll be fully automated.
Sure. And then there's also the other thing about the dumpster, which is bear-proof versus lockingable. So
I'll
we need to
talk
find
to-
out what that's going to run, what those things cost. If they've got them, why can't we get them? I guess that would be the next
We
question.
actually build our own, we designed our own bear-proof.
Is there a patent on it?
What's that?
Is there a patent on it? I mean, can
I'm
they
not
buy
sure if they
into
pull
it?
it on or not.
But they're good, and
They are.
they're very effective. They're very good. They're better than the heavy metal lids. that
You
we
say
use
we've
that
worked with
have.
Fish and Game many years on it, you know. and
So
we've got it wrong.
let me just say this in closing too, is since the issue came up, is I have a rental house at SWS. I have my primary residence, which is Alaska based. And I'll be the first one to tell you, and I'm on the Scenic Foothills Community Council. I'm one of the board members, in fact, in public safety chair. And I go to several community meetings, just like I know my colleagues do. And I have to defer. I'm not trying to pick. I'm just going to say, I don't think we do a good enough job in explaining. Perhaps in March, we should come out with information in the mail of every bill that comes out with waste. And it should be something like this, you know, colorful, something to put in the mailer. Again, maybe in June or May when the season's picking up for it. Community council meetings, informing and just keep informing. Channel 10, Municipal Channel 10, I know I've seen a few commercials along the way, but we can do a better job of getting the media now. I don't think we're done. I really don't believe it's not until we shoot a sow and 3 cubs and euthanize them, or somebody gets stomped, that we start hearing about the community concerns as much. Or like the girl at Petford that got run over by a grizzly, and about the fish runs and the grizzlies hanging along the fish runs. Well, it was 3 o'clock in the morning. They were out on a rover's run doing a bike race, and she just happened to smack into a bear. That was oh crap happens. Haven't we had 3 or 4 bear attacks just this summer already in town?
We've had, well, not in town. We've had them all in there
In
in the
Anchorage
park.
Bowl.
No, none in the Anchorage Bowl. No. We've had 4 brown bear maulings, and 2 of them have been within Chugach State Park, and 2 have been in large parcels adjacent to Chugach State Park.
Okay, so I know we're talking technicalities here. Chugach State
Eagle River.
Parks, Eagle River?
Yeah,
Which is
but-
in the greater Anchorage area?
Well, you said Anchorage Bowl.
Okay,
No,
okay, Bowl,
we
I
have,
guess.
I mean, there's a big difference though. I mean,
I
if
hear
you,
you.
I mean, really, like, because when you say Anchorage Bowl, it's the impression that kids are
People
getting
are in-
yanked out of their
No, no, no,
yards
no.
and mauled.
People are getting off into the trails, whether they're in Chugach State Parks or Kincaid or
Well, it
Platte
wasn't,
or
yeah, okay.
whatever.
It's Chugach State, well, we've had 4 maulings, Chugach State Park, and then 2 were private parcels of large, 65 acres against Chugach State Park, way up in the top of the mountains in the Eagle River, were the other maulings, yes.
So we're getting more bear activity, and like you say, maybe it's because people are getting to that area more often. Maybe they're using the trails more, maybe they're getting closer and closer.
Well, I can tell you what, we definitely have more recreation, and Elizabeth Manning is our ed person, and she heads up several educational committees on bears,
Sure.
as well as we have the Anchorage Bear Committee, and the Anchorage Bear Committee is focused on trash issues, her educational committee is focused on recreational issues, after the 2008 maulings, and they've done a lot for outreach and public awareness, and she busts her butt on outreach and stuff. But yes, you can't go to a trailhead that isn't packed and overflowing anymore.
And that's good in a lot of ways.
It's great in a lot of ways,
So
but
now we
there
have
is
to-
a responsibility out there too.
That's right.
Yes.
We do, when the automated carts do come to residences, we work with Fish and Game, and we do have pamphlets that have gone out with every single cart so far.
You mean when they're delivered?
Uh-huh.
Okay, 'cause
So,
mine was delivered
as
a couple
they're-
years ago.
I mean, as they're doing that, and we do have bearware messages in the billings, and then
I
we...
get mine, and I have to go back and look. I open them up and look at every one of my mailings, and I have not seen that many notices on bearware into it. I'm saying on both sides. Waste
Right.
management and this.
Oh, and I can tell you-
And I live at Scenic Foothills,
Yeah.
which is right below the chain,
Yep,
and
and-
they come at 6:30 every
We
morning.
have
And
one
we've-
limit for.
And we've had them in the A to Z guide, and we had already been planning on next spring to have like an animal and trash interaction thing, because the marine mammal program has got an entanglement thing. So we were already planning on next spring's having, you know, bears and trash and entanglement and other wildlife trash interactions in the Anchorage Zero Waste Guide, which goes to all municipal households.
If I may, Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
when did that go in the flyer?
It went out, it was,
In the
it was in
mailer.
the, it was in the,
The mailer.
no, it wasn't in the mailer, it was in the packets
I
when the
didn't
cards
think
were
so.
delivered, so
Yeah.
as people have got, I've got this new card, what am I gonna do with it? It's at that point, and then, and there is a message that went out, if you're signed up for the email that comes out monthly, that message was in the email that came out
Well, I
last.
admit I didn't perhaps read that email, but I will.
So,
say-
I mean, it's
Sure.
there, I mean.
Can we
it's-
do better? I guess I'm saying I think we can. I believe we can.
We can
I'm pretty
always do
convinced
better.
we can. I mean, because if we weren't doing better, if we were doing the best we could, I think we'd have a better outreach. And perhaps we've done very well in Stucco Heights with the efforts. I've heard that.
Well, and
So
I can
let's
tell you,
repeat that.
we don't like every spring put in a stuffer in our mailer that says, you know, it's bear season, here's you know, an option for you and whatnot. That's a good idea, and it really comes down to, I don't think any one solution is right. You gotta
Right.
keep working on all of them, and you gotta keep educating the best you can on all of them. But I can say that in the last 11 years, with what we've done with Fish and Game, we've mitigated a lot of this stuff that, right now in Stucco Heights, if we didn't have these bear carts, we'd be, well, these guys would be, that's where they'd be for the summer.
Sure.
Now they've gotta
So-
crawl into houses instead of getting into the trash
Exactly. I
cans.
know we've had one where a guy came down and shot one in his bathroom, not too long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I guess. So-
Not this far.
About three,
I
four
would
years.
remember that one.
We had one in the house, but I think the guys got it out of the house.
Yeah, yeah. It just ran in.
And there's one got in high school.
Mr. Chairman, can we move on?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the comments and the conversation about that, and I look forward to input and ideas, and particularly in the area code changes. I think we can get together. So if you would, if you have my email, if you just let me know when we can possibly meet and talk about that.
Yeah,
And
sure.
thank you
Thanks
so much
for
for
having-
being here.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thanks for having us.
Okay, so since we don't have fire, health, human services, thank you. If you need to leave, you certainly may, Jen, and I, Chief, you're on the hot seat, real quick. And I just want to say that I missed, I apologize that I missed some of the community conversations on use of force, recent use of force in our community by officers of the department. And so I guess I'm asking you directly, since I missed those meetings, since I was out of town, is there anything that you can share with us that we could do to help, to facilitate, to change the code, get tasers, educate the community more? I mean, I can tell you some things that I know that we are doing right. I guess an update, please.
Well, this has been a real interesting month or 6 weeks.
Thank you.
Trying to figure out where to begin on answering that question. We've been challenged, the Tossie shooting, if you're a prosecutor, an attorney of some kind, even, I hate to put him out, so I won't. I think for people in the business, they don't have, it was a no-brainer as far as the legality issues, but it's a difficult one for the public to get its mind around. And we've had difficulty getting our message out, getting it understood by the public, getting the media to report what we say the way we say it, and it's just been a really big challenge. The Polynesian community has been quite vocal, as you know. They've scheduled some events. We have repeated meetings with them. There may be more in the works, so I'm not sure yet how that's going to go. We had the largest meeting, or the one that was actually probably in. It didn't turn out to be the largest meeting, but it was thought to be the big community meeting at the Assembly Chambers. That was the last one we had. It was probably 2 weeks ago now. Not that many people came. About 20 came. And probably 15 of the 20 were from the Polynesian community. There were some hangers-on. They had their own separate things they wanted to talk about.
I was one of them.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was there.
But we had folks with other issues, I guess, that saw an opportunity to come in. The odd part about that discussion, I thought, was, well, I thought we had answered many of those questions already with some of the very people that testified. In fact, in the case of one of them, I think we'd answered those questions 3 times. I thought the meeting was going to get into more, where do we go from here? How do we improve community engagement? How do we understand our police department better? How do we understand your policies better? How does the Samoan community or the Polynesian community interact with the police department to break down barriers, perceived or real? And we never got into those discussions. We're still in the discussions about why do you shoot a guy who's swinging a stick. So the frustrating part of that conversation for me was I didn't think the conversation had progressed at all. On the flip side, there weren't hardly any people there. So I don't know if that means that it's only a handful of folks that are really still upset, or it's also possible, though, that those were representatives of larger congregations and so forth, and then for each one of them, there's 100 behind them. So I don't know that I've got a handle on that issue yet. We have tried to keep this focused through the public, the minority task, we call it minority task force, that's the old terminology, but the police community relations task force, because they do have that history, they do have the written mission that the mayor gives them and has since 1981. And so that seemed like the proper forum rather than try and deal separately with all these different potentially ad hoc different groups that some are just forming up in the wake of this event. Trying to centralize channel our efforts through that group. They're going to meet again here in another couple of weeks, and we'll see where the group wants to go. And presumably they're going to create a subcommittee. They may ask for, I don't know if they're going to take more testimony. I assume they probably will. They'll probably assign a subcommittee to make some recommendations, maybe look over certain documents and find out more information from the police department, and ultimately make some recommendations to the mayor. What those will be, remains to be seen here. I don't know yet how that process will play out. We are reviewing our use of force policies, our response to resistance policies right now. That was on the books for a review before this event even occurred. And of course, as you know, Paul, after you have one of these, we do an internal review anyway, so there's more than one reason to be reviewing the policies. I sense that there are a whole lot of people that would like to become involved in writing the police department's policies. So I'm walking the tightrope right now between, how do I be transparent? How do I accept public input without just turning my policy over and having it written by a lot of folks that don't know the standards and don't have the background and understand the legal issues and the technology and so forth. So I don't know yet how that's going to play. I have made no commitments yet, other than I am happy to listen and take everyone's input, that I'm happy to explain our policies, that if there's a desire, I'll produce a white paper, if you will, a layman's term, a document that describes in layman's terms what our policies are. Having said that, there are people in the Polynesian community who are putting out emails saying that I have agreed to let them write our policy. So I'm still frustrated that I say X and I'm quoted as saying Y. So anyway, we will be taking, I think I will propose to the minority task force that they allow I may allow the subcommittee in executive session to go through our policies and make some suggestions, and we'll take that under advisement as we go through and do our policy upgrade. We may be willing to do that. I'm not sure I'm ready to just turn it over to the ACLU and say, hey, write my policy for me. I'm not sure we're going to just take these policies and just make them public in their verbatim form, because so many people will run around with the policy manual and they won't fully understand it because it's written in cop jargon and, test us all the time. There's some drawbacks to doing that. I don't think the city attorney would want me to just give those up because we usually hold those as confidential documents unless they're given over due to some sort of court order, discovery, or executive session type of briefing. We have to protect other policies as well. So I'm on that tightrope. I want to show they're not top secret. What we do, and so I want people to understand what we do, and I want people to ask questions and make suggestions. But I can't also throw it wide open.
Trying to get a question or comment.
Thanks for not turning your policy wide open to the public. I remember years ago, we took the Board of Ethics program, and it went from 5 pages to 55 pages now, and no one can understand it. I'm afraid if you turn it over to the public, that's what you'll get out of it.
Well, and it's full of terms that people that aren't in the business don't understand, and so they're going to misunderstand it the way it's written.
Your obligation is to protect both the public and the officers that are enforcing the policy, and I want to make sure you're not limiting the ability of the officer to protect the public or themselves.
Sure, and I don't want somebody to say, stop, don't move, put your hands up, and they say, you don't have objective reasonableness, so I'm not going to comply. And then we get in a debate about objective reasonableness while we're duking it out on the ground. I mean, we
I know. Let me ask you about tasers. Have you figured out a cost yet on how many tasers you need and the training for the officers so we can give them an option to using lethal force? You were telling me the current tasers we have are not operational, so we need to get new ones.
Well, we have a few that aren't. I think we're approaching the halfway point in patrol anyway with tasers. And I know we're getting short on time, but they're phasing out the model we have, and the new model is a far improved model, but it's going to cost way more. So it would be expanding the existing fleet isn't the same thing. I mean, we're going to have to buy the new tasers and start eating into the existing fleet is going to start to, as those units start failing, they're not going to replace them. So
Within a month, could you give us at least a figure on what we're looking at?
Right, that's what I was going to ask.
That's what I need, Chief. It's just the total dollar amount, the amount of equipment we're talking about, and the amount of training cost-wise we'd have to make it a viable option.
I can work that up. What's the big question in my mind is, and I still don't know the answer to it, is how many tasers do we need? I mean, I think the mayor has telegraphed that he's okay with everybody having a taser. And so that would be easy to put a price tag on that.
He's not a police officer, Chief, you are. I want your opinion.
I have to echo that. I'm asking, the same question is, I know that every trooper, road trooper anyway, carries a taser. I think even a detective. And I'm sorry for jumping in if you have a question, but are we at that point? And I know that the department in the past has retained its decision-making from the policy level, whether or not they wanted each officer to have that. I know that.
We hadn't decided on a specific number. We had decided to start slow and test the waters and see how this was accepted. And so much like when the Godfrey matter happened, we found out overnight, Eagle River, we thought didn't care about having Allie and Annie. They just liked to be near the building, Yellow Rock. All of a sudden, what do you mean we don't have reliable Allie and Annie?
We used the Yellow Rock for everything when I lived out there.
Yeah.
It was how far you were from the Yellow Rock.
2 months ago, I'd have told you the press and the ACLU and many of our ethnic communities hated the taser because everything they know about it or read about it, Rodney King and all that stuff, they absolutely hated it, wouldn't tolerate us even having one minor slip up or one perception of overuse. So we started, pretty slow and kind of testing the waters and watching the developing case law. There's been a little bit of Alaska case law developing. We wanted to make sure that other departments were making the mistakes before us. All of a sudden, what do you mean we don't have a taser in every hand? Taser, buy more tasers. Well, we can buy the tasers. I hope the public...
Chief, just what I need is the bottom line on this. I want to know how much money, how many officers we're talking about. And that, Chief, it's up to you. You're the executive officer of the police department.
Okay.
We're politicians at best. We steal milk money from children. So just let me know the total dollar amount, and
Okay.
we'll deal with what the mayor wants.
All right, we'll come up with a plan.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I hear you say at that meeting, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong, that we got a grant to buy tasers?
Did I say that?
I don't think I dreamt it.
No, we got an appropriation from the state capital.
Yeah, that's a grant.
Yeah, I guess you could call it that. We use a different name for it, but yes, the state did give us an appropriation to buy more tasers.
How much money are we
Okay.
talking about, Chief?
I don't want to swear on it, but 30,000 sticks in my mind. I don't know if that's correct or not.
These are better than 1,000 apiece, closer than 2,000 apiece, correct?
Well, no, the hang-up with the state appropriation was we thought at the time that we wanted the taser shotgun. They've taken that off the market. It was problematic. And so we've had to go back and talk about the language and make sure that we could use it for more handheld tasers. Those are running about $800 a piece. But the new model, the X2 or X1, whatever it is going to be more like $1,300 or $1,400 a piece.
Thank you.
And that's, I guess, Mr. Trainee summed it up to me, and I say this to all the department heads, and I'm not just selecting you, Chief, to say it, but the mayor's a mayor getting elected. He doesn't run the police department, he doesn't run the health department. You're tasked with providing the very best police service, the very best health and human services to our community. That's what they deserve, and so I'm asking, if you need something, we need to know. That's one of the next questions, which I segue in real quick, like, to the budgets coming up. And this may be one of those items that you may be desiring, or that you may want to tell us the price tag that might be looking at it. And Ms. Gray Jackson may have a question.
Well, I just want to say to you and Mark, since, you're absolutely right, but he reports to the mayor.
I get it.
And, no, I'm just saying, in his defense, and it's too bad, we have not too bad, we have two levels of government, and anyway. Now,
We
we're gonna do the
appropriate the
budget?
funds, LV, and I want to make sure he's got the money.
Oh, no, I agree with you 100%. I'm with you both on that, but, anyway.
Because the taser's a lot cheaper than a bullet.
I'm
Because
with
once
you
you
on
launch
that.
that bullet, you can never retrieve it.
I'm with you on that.
The liability seems to me to be a lot less with the taser, and having the equipment and not needing it is much better than needing it and not having it.
Well, if we were going to test the public acceptance, I think we just tested it.
I believe so.
So it was a hard way to test it, but I guess the public doesn't mind us having tasers.
Well, no, Mark, years ago, back when Janice Schamberg was on the assignment with me, the question came up because we use tasers. And so they volunteered me to get hooked up to a taser. And believe me, when they hit the button, I'm on the ground trying to figure out how I got down there. But there's no long-term effect.
I'd love
They
to
do.
see
I
that.
remember that.
I'd love to have seen that.
Well, the argument was, could we use them on civilians? And Janice Schamberg said, I'll change my vote if we hook Dick up to it. And they pulled the switch, and I'm down there.
I mean, I could see how the troopers jumped into it faster than us because, they're alone so much of the time, and if you're waiting for your next unit to arrive with a taser, that could be an awful long wait for a trooper. So, for them, the risk of going slow is bigger than us, and we're smaller, tighter, denser, and we could start a little slower because, Paul, if I don't have a taser, you're going to be here in another 2 minutes. So we kind of managed it that way.
We started, if my recollection's right, we started that way with OC spray, and
We did.
then all of a sudden everybody got doused with it because that was part of the requirements. And the same thing goes with tasers. Every officer has to get use applied to them so they understand and feel it.
So maybe we know what we need to know now.
Don't forget it once, you had it.
So just, you got an idea. Budget. I know that we haven't had a lot of
Yeah,
time.
let's
Budget,
talk
is there
about it.
concerns that you have? We had put money in to try to prepare for an academy in 2013. What's the status on that, and what are we looking at for
I don't
numbers?
think there's going to be an academy in 2013.
If I may, the question is, what's your 2013 budget look like? And I have a specific question. Are there any police officers that are going to be cut positions? I
As you
turned
just
off my
pointed out,
tape recorder, so
as you
don't
just-
worry.
As you just pointed out, I do work for the mayor. And the budget is still, with the mayor's office and hasn't gone out yet.
Could I help you, LV? Is the mayor planning on cutting police positions?
I'm trying
Phrase
to
it that
get-
way.
That's,
Right now, George's departments have a $24 million problem. George has to save $24 million. I'm authorized to tell you that. I think the Assembly, at least a couple people in the Assembly got briefed on that. So you can start doing the math yourself. Right, today's...
Let's ask our budget analyst to help us out, Dick.
Today's projections are not good, but there are some revenue considerations out there that aren't nailed down yet. I must tell you that we're working on some things that we can't talk about yet that could help, and I'm not convinced yet that the situation is necessarily going to unfold the way it's looking today. If it did unfold the way it's looking today, we're going to have to get rid of a whole lot of all of our open PCNs, and we probably would have to consider other personnel reductions. But that's if the situation does not change.
Which will probably include police officers, because there are some PCN numbers for sworn officers.
Well, I would tell you that if you're trying to find large amounts of money, going to non-sworn doesn't get you there, because those positions don't have much money in them, and there are fewer of them to begin with, right? We don't have very many non-sworn, and they don't make very much money, so if you're...
No, did I say non-sworn?
You said...
Police officers.
You said
I'm
that
sorry,
they would be
police
sworn.
officers, yeah, sworn.
Well,
yeah.
that's where the money is.
Right, and so, it sounds like to me, and you didn't say this, okay, just to cover you, but it sounds like to me that there are gonna be some police officer positions cut for 2013, and it's unfortunate, and it's scary.
I'm not telling you...
You didn't say that.
Anything that I haven't talked to the folks in the squad room about. And what I've told them is we go through these budget discussions every year. Every year we're given scenarios. Every year we say, well, what would you do if we cut you by this much? Well, this is what I do. Okay, now what would you do if we only cut you by this much? Well, here's what I do. So all those things are ugly. It's ugly every year internally before you guys see the numbers. Okay, we're in that realm right now, but I don't think the scenarios I'm wrestling around with today are the ones that you will see down the road, because it's still, as Cheryl used to say, swirling around, and revenues aren't nailed down yet.
Let me just say that with my conversations and just, I guess, snippets and quippets, I don't even remember
What's
this
a
one.
quippet? Just kidding.
Quips,
Just
quotes.
kidding.
Bottom line is that the mayor himself is on record at one of our work sessions saying that, if labor would give up all their increases that they're scheduled to get in 2013, that there wouldn't be a shortfall of money. I know that's a comment that was made. That's the number one thing that was said.
That there wouldn't be an issue at all?
There wouldn't be an issue.
Oh, I never heard that.
I heard him say that at one of our budget work sessions.
I heard 20-something million, and if we tax the cap 10.
That he said that if they gave up all the projected raises for 2013 that's come through the contracts, that we would not have the shortfall. That would go away, the problem would go away.
Typical
Somebody's
that's-
gonna give back all the executive pay raises he gave?
These are
And the
the
new
ones that covered
hires?
under contracts. The other thing that I'm concerned with is that, of course, on the Assembly, and I think Mr. Trainee said it right, we set the policy, we set the budget, and we ask the administration to execute. So we have set a budget item to plan for an academy in 2013 on some expected shortages of police officers for people resigning, retiring, that is proposed through a survey done by your department. And I'm concerned as a member of this community, as a member of this body, that we're going the wrong direction. And I'm just being as candid and blunt as I can be, and we're on the record. I'm disappointed in, not you, Chief, I'm disappointed in this number, and I'm concerned about how we're trying to get there, and the discussions that lead up to it. So I challenge my colleagues that maybe perhaps we need to do something to figure a way to make the numbers meet.
Well, don't get me wrong. I'm telling you today's exercise.
Sure.
And there are possibilities out there that would change this landscape.
Are there new federal grants program to be coming down? These are, we've gotten years' money in the past to hire police officers with federal dollars. Is there another program like that?
I am not aware of any grant programs that would help us out.
We're about
here.
there.
The federal grants are starting to dry up a little bit. Ms. Gray Jackson, I want to, do you have just 10 seconds? I said something to you a minute ago, and I want to make sure I clarified it.
Okay.
Kronos does not have a problem dealing with 980s when it's based on an 80-hour paycheck.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, because I know for a fact that 980s is an issue with Kronos.
Well, it's an issue, it could be an issue with Kronos if you weren't talking about an 80-hour work week.
Right, I'm glad you clarified that, because
Okay.
I was thinking, I don't think Mark is correct, but I didn't want to put you on the spot.
No,
so
right
thank you.
now, everything's based on an 80-hour work week. Kronos is programmed for 980s. I approved my people who were on 980s. I push approve, it prints out. I've been doing it for 2 months now.
Yeah, but I know there are issues with 980s. But thank you for clarifying.
But if you change it to a different kind of format, then you got to reprogram Kronos in order for it to be able to handle 980s.
Mhm.
But right now, we're not doing that, so
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
Thank you. See you later.
Anything else, Chief?
I guess all I'm trying to tell you is we don't have hard numbers yet. So everything that I'm telling you, if I seem like I'm doom and gloom, we may not be there a month from now.
I'm just going to say, because I know it's there, and it is always an option in this body. Well, we have nearly a $30 million surplus in our surplus, the ones that we can access. So to me, there isn't an issue. We've got, the state has about 16 billion with a B in a surplus account. And I don't know how quick we can get an appropriation for 2013's budget. Likelihood not until January, till the session starts. But bottom line is that I don't think it's for the lack of money that we have a problem. I think the problem is the lack of clear vision and strategies going forward for 2013 and beyond, because, and that's something we have to reconcile, both the executive branch and the legislative branch. So I don't want to put you in the middle of that, Chief, any further than we already have.
We're going to do the best we can with what we have, and we're going to try to preserve as many officers as we possibly can.
I can commit to you from this committee and from my body, my seat on the assembly, that our public safety shouldn't waver at the results of a few pennies in here and there. And I know there are a lot of pennies when you add up 24 million, but there's a problem here with strategy and vision. Chief, I guess on a personal side, Dick, do you have anything else? Just to say from my own professional and personal observations, and again, I wasn't here for the month of July, pretty much a good percentage of it, and I missed some of the opportunities to speak with the community with you, with both experience and leadership from the assembly, so I apologize to you for that. Secondly, and my wife tells me to be careful what I say and how I say it and to who I say it, and I don't care, I'm on the record. I heard this long ago from many trainers and from some experience that I had, is that this community, I know we do Citizen Police Academy, I know that you're involved with the Community Relations Task Force, NAACP, years ago as bridge builders. I'm not sure if they're still active, as active as they have in the past. There were these roundtables with members of the diversity, leaders in the diverse areas and groups in the community. And I would encourage you to revisit some of those things that worked, that were best practice, and try to reach out. For instance, anytime there was a officer involved use of force, someone of, much like, I liken it to someone who's a foreign national who's arrested and has the, under the State Department's laws, that we must contact their consulate within a set period of time to make them aware that their person has been arrested in this country. So much like that, I don't know that we want to get to a point where it's required, but a good direction of policy and just clear vision that someone from command staff make communication outreach to leaders of the Polynesian community involving a high-profile incident, whether it be an officer-involved shooting or some sort of thing like that. I mean, I don't know where we stop or start that, but a dialogue is something that I think just having that ongoing dialogue with the chief's office at the highest levels that they have, for lack of, I think that's very important. And then lastly, I guess where I was going with that is that when people do not comply with the instructions of a police officer in uniform, and having been there, and I guess maybe I'll take personal bias on this, is that they're volunteering for escalated level of response to the resistance or use of application of a level of force that has increased from just verbal command. And so, as sad as it is that somebody's brother, mother, son, father, whomever, they volunteered to have an application of a higher level of force other than verbal command when they didn't comply, and they had an opportunity. And that's my understanding. I'm waiting for the end result. I know we're in litigation, at least, or pending litigation with at least one of those circumstances, and I know the community is very raw with this right now. So I stand ready to help in future events and meetings, and I'd love to be involved if there's that dialogue and perhaps be a part of, moving part of solutions and strategies to communicate that. Citizen Police Academy, by the way, I think we're scheduled to start one in September, so if there's anybody that you think we need outreach.
We may have a larger Polynesian contingent to the Citizens Police Academy as a result of this event. I should tell you that we call the minority task force whenever we have an in-custody death involving a minority person. And that is the group that is supposed to be proactive in bringing in the affected communities and working through all of that.
Did that happen this time?
Those notifications have been made and were made. We probably weren't as successful this time, but the notifications were made according to agreements.
That's good, because again, that may be the best vehicle to task them with that responsibility to make sure that they reach out. Not that you can say, I made my one phone call and I can let Reverend Green take it from here if he or she is the chairman still. And so I guess
This one did take us by surprise. I'm not going to push try and push the blame to anyone else. We've had several shootings since I've been back. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them have involved minority communities. We've made our phone calls. Nothing's ever come of any of them. This one didn't seem to us like it was going to be problematic. We were kind of taken by surprise that it went, we did everything on this one the same way as the other ones, and the other ones weren't a problem, and this one became a problem.
Anything else? Chief? We're just a little beyond time, but anything else?
Don't think so.
If we can get those numbers on the tasers, that what it might be, and then is there anything else to get at?
Just the total cost of it.
Last night I made a comment, you weren't there.
Spice.
Yes, Spice K2.
Yes,
I've
my thing went off and they said you were asking about it.
Yes, I've had the East Side constituent base and also another comment from Mr. Tom McGrath about, and you may have gotten the email, basically saying that he's under the awareness that there are businesses, there are some locations that may be selling, and they're saying, well, we can sell this because it doesn't have the same chemical composition it was made. And I just need to know, are we finding this out? Is this just an anecdotal thing, or somebody reporting this to the police and the police try to make arrests? And I guess since we've passed these ordinances, and of course the state statutes corresponding, have there been any charges, any investigations, I guess I need to know that.
Okay, so here's where we are. And it's rapidly changing landscape. 6 weeks ago, we had neither lab tests nor field tests. And the stores were slapping labels on their products saying this passes DEA, it's not a DEA controlled substance, which of course is BS. And we could go in and we could buy this stuff, but we had no way of proving whether it's got bath salts or it's synthetic cannabinoids or synthetic cathinoids. That's the spice,
Bath salts and cocaine.
Spice and bath salts. So anyway, that's where we were, and so we were highly frustrated, through the late May, early June. In June, the crime lab moved. They hired a spice person. They got their lab tests in, so they can test it in the lab. Toxicology tests are there. They're ugly in that you got to run that one. If you're lucky, you got your answer. But if you run that one, you didn't. You got to run that one and that one until you. So it takes a while to tox. So now what we can do is we can go into the stores and we could buy a packet of stuff and we could send it to the lab. We could wait a month. They come back and they say yeah, it's Spice, then we can go do something with that shopkeeper. But it's lengthy, okay? It's really tough on a street bus. You get some hooligan down in town square with some Spice. It's a month before you know whether you can charge him. SAU just got the first field test kits last week. We've had 2 major powwows with the DEA, FBI, U.S. Attorney, State DA, a bunch of other players. We're putting together a statewide strategy for dealing with Spice. Now that we got the lab up and running, state crime lab and the test kits, we started by having all the chiefs of police in the state submit their names of everybody they suspect to be a Spice or bath salts dealer. The Fusion Center created this major database of every business in the state, and they researched who owns the land, who the proprietor is, what their criminal histories are, what their address, phone number, all that stuff on a big spreadsheet. That's gone to DEA. DEA has filed an OCDETF application for the whole state, and we're waiting word on that. That'll put money into the enforcement thing, which will fund expanded lab services and overtime for the feds and the locals to attack these spots. Meanwhile, starting 2 weeks ago, SAU and CAP started visiting all the places on the list in Anchorage, serve a notice. That shit's that's on your shelf, excuse me, you're still taping, it's illegal, you gotta pull it, here's a letter, and you gotta have it off the shelf, it's illegal, and you can't sell it. And they say, of course, our stuff is legal, and we say, you better not be selling anything that's illegal. And then we leave, and then the undercovers go in and they buy, and now we're field testing that stuff, sending it to the lab. Our strategy is to start shutting down tobacco shops, seizing property, abating places, throwing people in jail, and you'll start seeing that happening over the next month.
Are there any, yes?
Chief, do you need anything in the law that allows you to shut the building down?
That's my point.
Once you can prove what it is, you want the paperwork, the ability, we'll give you the authority to shut the building down. It's a danger to the public.
I think we might have the ability.
Under city ordinance?
I think city abatement takes a little while to do, but the state revenue people that do tobacco stuff, they can pull a license like that, and so they're on this task force. And the DA believes that we can seize the properties, both the U.S. Attorney and the state DA. How fast that goes, I don't know. I don't have the experience yet on how quick it's going to be. I don't know that it's instant, like as soon as we get a lab report.
Well, let's do something about that, because we could probably
interest
put
of
it
public
under,
safety.
there's got to be something out there dealing with this terrorist act or something, some way we could couch it to give them the authority to shut the place down immediately.
If it's an interest of public safety, there's been, in Oregon, I know there used to be some issues where they did it for building safety, so there's no reason why you couldn't do it for public safety.
Danger to
Well,
public safety.
we're trying to work at a pace that doesn't, that the attorneys, that the U.S. Attorney and the DA are comfortable with, because they're going to have to take these cases and seize these properties.
Sure.
And so they want us to get our ducks in a row before they do it. So we'll get better at it, and in the beginning we'll probably be a little clunky until we get a couple of them under our belt and figure out what worked and what didn't. But I think you're going to start seeing some movement. It's taken a while for us to catch up with the laws. We got the laws right away. You guys passed them, and then the state came along and passed them. But we didn't have the test kits, and we didn't have the lab capacity, and we had to build all that stuff. Well, we have it now, and I think you're going to see some momentum.
Chief, just if you think there's anything at all we can do to help you, the tools that you need, let us know. Because this is a real problem out there. So many people now are getting picked up, and they're not blowing alcohol. That's something else in their system.
Oh, Tossie was high on Spice, and I'll bet you, if we had a kitty here, I was throwing my money in it, I'd say that this guy on the Glen Highway has probably got synthetics in him.
It's a problem in the community. Chief, thanks for your candor and for letting us know the update, and look forward to some future dialogue and for the information, of course. We'll be here to support you as we need. Ms. Tran and I will probably work with our attorney to see if we can't do something. We wouldn't want to do anything that would usurp state or federal authorities on their seizure and assets and such. But he's right. If we can get confirmatory, without a doubt, yes, it's something that they've been noticed to not sell, and they've sold it anyway. that we might be able to at least shut that business down on the city premise that it's an interest in public safety and therefore,
Well, Pearl alcohol license, I mean, in Pearl conditional use for alcohol license, we have control of conditional uses.
yes. So we can just-
Mostly they're tobacco stores, not all. The highest one on our list
They have to have a
is,
conditional use of something, we have to, so we can put
That
a
we can use
restriction
the
or.
vehicle poll.
We'll talk to Julia and maybe Dennis and see, because Dennis is a property attorney, he said by
the
trade.
black market is,
Well, there's one in Lowell Dune apparently, because I've gotten 2 or 3.
oh, there's a bunch of them. There's Smoking Joe's and Smoke King and
What's it? There's a town down in Utah that just outlawed smoking shops.
Because
Because they were finding they were selling that stuff there, the smoking shops, so the city now just outlawed them. I forget what city it is, but they just did that.
Talking to a guy my age or older, and kids are about the same age, and he was basically saying, the best thing you can do for me, for my family, Paul, is to close down, and I can't remember the name of the building, but he said one of the buildings on East Anchorage, and selling bath salts or spice, one of the other. He said, my kid's just totally addicted to it. He said, I can't get him broke free of it, so. And then I got a community council president, and then McGrath, so I've had 3 just in the last week or so.
Let's talk to you on the angle of the conditional use.
All right, it is 1:47, and I will be off record. I should not turn that off, I guess.
Hold the plug.
That's good. If you can't, let me know and I'll do what I can. Thank you, Mr. Hess, for being here, Mr. Ombudsman, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.